is developing, and we are recording now, developing effective and productive relationships with marketing vendors. And Stacey Burke is an attorney with a marketing firm. And she is someone I met, I don't know how many years ago now. We've served on the Houston Bar Association Law Practice Management Section board together for at least a year. And we've, helped each other out, know a lot of common colleagues in this big city of Houston. But, I've always thought of you as a really great expert in this marketing space. And so if you want to go to your next slide, I will. I know that you have more than 20 years attorney experience, and you've spent millions of dollars on behalf of 2 law firms in which you work various marketing vendors. Wow. So you really you're an expert on this topic, and that's why I'm really glad I asked you to speak. And it's really interesting when we were preparing for this. It's like some people try to do this in-house, sort of whimsically and not really having experience, and then sort of the ups and downs. Then sometimes they figure out, okay, now I need to hire somebody to help me. But then they don't know how to interview them, who to choose, they're basically like employees in a way, but they're contractors because you have to manage their success and monitor their progress. And you can't just like set it and forget it. And so going through all of the slides as we prepared, when we talked, pre-chatted, I just was like, yes, you've basically consolidated a lot of the hard lessons that I have learned over the years into one space. And so I hope that those who are here live today feel free to ask questions. As you know, this is Empower Strategy Group, where we have very open discussion space in this, in our meetings and webinar. But also those who watch this, please, we're going to put this on our YouTube and send it out to those who registered. So you've now provide your consulting services where you work as a marketing vendor, you audit the work of marketing vendors, and you work with and supervise other marketing vendors. So who better to do this presentation? So I'll go ahead and let you go ahead and get started. And like in normal fashion, we have a good maybe 40-ish or so minutes on the topic, and then but you can anyone can ask questions as we go, and put it in the chat if you feel like that's a better venue. And then we have some closing thoughts of upcoming webinars and things coming up, things to consider. So thank you so much again, Stacey. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Ruby. I always enjoy engaging with you in every way, and I'm excited to be here and talk with all of you. So yes, I have been licensed for 20 years in Texas and in some federal courts in the Fifth Circuit. I did litigate and work in-house for 2 different firms, one as a senior associate and one as a partner. So I worked with marketing vendors as a consumer of services, and then became, as a consultant, a vendor and someone who audits vendors. So I feel like I have kind of a good perspective on both sides of the spectrum. So the question is really, why would you want to work with outsourced marketing vendors, right? So a lot of firms sort of have this approach that I have X number of employees, I already have this overhead. Why can't I just use like my receptionist when she's not on the phone, or my paralegal in their spare time, and they can learn how to do social media, or I can teach them MailChimp, or I can get someone to design it and we can maintain it in-house. And so we'll talk a little bit today about why you may want to work with outsourced vendors. And there are so many out there that can meet a variety of different needs. So outsourcing has been a really integral business practice for a long time. It basically involves, on a fundamental level, a business having to outsource a certain skill set, right? So like I use a CPA, right? I don't have an accounting background. I'm not amazing with numbers. I do a good job of keeping my books every month, but I use a CPA to do my taxes. And this would be the same thing, right? So while many lawyers think, oh, marketing is easy, if I just had enough time, I can learn it myself and do it myself. Sometimes, as with an accountant, hiring an expert to meet those needs is better than trying to learn how to do it yourself. And this kind of goes along with why. Right? So statistics indicate that business owners can spend up to 6 hours of their workday doing things that don't improve their bottom line, right? So like we all know as business owners or people that contribute to business owners that we do a lot of administrative tasks. So wouldn't you rather be using that time, if you're an attorney, working on your cases and moving your files towards monetization, or in an immigration context, helping your people move further along in the process? That really is what you're trained in and a better use of your time. So the whole point really of outsourcing is both to harness that talent that doesn't exist within, and to use your time and your staff's time doing really what you were hired for, which is the legal work and or other work.
And I think this is a really good point, Stacey, because I mean, I think as every business owner, this is the constant struggle. When do you hire and outsource, and when do you try to do it yourself? And if it's going to take you a long time and there's lots of change, you're just never going to master it, and it's going to take you, if you're going to be, it's going to be part of the 6 hours. I mean, we only have, I guess, so many hours a day anyway. Then it's probably something you'd be better to outsource. And so, I mean, I think when you're a newbie business owner, it's understandable to not know when to do when to outsource and when to do it yourself. But I know you're going to talk more about when to do that. And I think this is a really good area to outsource as a business owner.
Yeah, and there are so many different opportunities, especially in a big market like Houston, but even in small markets, there are, recent graduates or even people that are still in undergrad that, you have to bring them in and teach them a little bit. There's a little bit of a learning curve about the legal industry, about your practice areas, and about the ethics rules that govern us. But if you build a relationship and cultivate a relationship with a vendor, it can be very fruitful, and it doesn't contribute to your overhead because you don't have to pay them benefits. You only have to pay them for the hours that they work, depending upon your engagement and so on. So these are some more advantages of outsourcing. It saves your time. It saves you money because you're not hiring a full-time person, increases profitability because you're focused on what actually makes you money, provides access to resources and skills that you don't currently have in-house. Instead of like sending someone to an online class, you're getting someone who has, like me, I have my undergraduate degrees in public relations journalism, right? And then I have 20 years of experience in law, right? So that's a skill set that it's very hard to develop in someone who doesn't have that background. And then increasing the focus on doing your job and the efficiency of your business operations. We've touched on those already. And then this is just sort of as an aside, it's a good example of where I've seen this make the most impact. A lot of people want to DIY, right? You want to do it yourself. You want to learn WordPress or learn Squarespace or use Canva, which is amazing, to make social graphics. Amateur design does not look the same as professional design. It might cost you more, but you get what you pay for. And so for some things, not every single thing, but for many things, especially if you're getting a template, right? The first time you make an email marketing template, you can reuse the template, but pay a professional to design it and code it into the software so that it looks nice, it renders correctly across all devices, and you can use it on an ongoing basis. So investing in creative work, I think, is very important. So what are the different marketing vendors that matter for law firms and for everybody, and kind of what do they do? And I'll just kind of skim through this as a quick overview. Marketing is here to stay, kind of as an opener. Today, very few of the top producing businesses across all verticals, but specifically even in the law, can rely solely on word of mouth. I get a lot of business through word of mouth and referrals. I'm sure a lot of you do too, but your competitors are in the digital space, right? And there, of course, there's offline advertising as well, but the focus today will be mainly digital. But companies either must get an in-house team or work with a vendor or vendors and be present in a meaningful way in this space, or are you missing out on opportunities? It's interesting. Sometimes when I meet with attorneys, they say, oh, I have so much business, I can't handle more business. And I say, well, you could hire an associate, right? Or you can hire a virtual paralegal. Having more business is a good problem. There are a lot of bad problems that we can have, because I do some operations consulting as well. But having too much business is not a problem. You can always figure out how to get more staff and or more attorneys in to help you with that overflow. There's always going to be growing pains, and I'd rather have the good growing pains than not. So this, I don't know, Ruby, did you have a question you
I
want to?
did have a question because I think you're a perfect person to ask this. When I started my firm 12 years ago, I was slightly jealous of the people who said they didn't advertise and they had all the word of mouth. And it just sort of snowballed from there. And then here, but I hustled, those 12 years. Like I was online. I had to learn a lot of this stuff that you're teaching people like the hard way. And then I finally started hiring people who could help me, an X&B specialist. But anyway, my thought is, do you think that we've seen a sort of a shift in how lawyers get business? Like, do you think it used to be more of word of mouth, and then like somewhere it sort of gradually shifted to being a little bit more digital and word of mouth? Or like, have you seen, because I know in a lot of research I did, like we really couldn't do a lot of advertising, I think, until
Yes.
The 80s, or I don't know what year it was, but so some of the old school attorneys, that's just their modus operandi because that's how they were taught, and it was almost like it was a dirty thing or something to market or something.
Oh,
So
you're right.
yeah, so I wasn't sure if like you've noticed a shift over time.
So yes, attorney advertising used to be illegal. We used to consider the public just far too big of Luddites to be able to understand and distinguish between what would be true and accurate about legal services. And we do still have rules that govern our communications so that we don't miscommunicate or mislead. But yeah, advertising was illegal. So yes, there's been a tremendous amount of change. And I would say that during COVID and the pandemic, those changes escalated, meaning that regardless of practice area, because I work with firms in every practice area and in most major geos. And I would say that even, insurance defense and commercial litigation, now the clients want sometimes even a different type of engagement. They want a firm that's more technologically savvy. And so what we are marketing about ourselves is different, right? Like, we can handle your case virtually if you're uncomfortable coming in. And these are the tools that we use to do that. Or, these are the other points of differentiation that make us more accessible, more efficient, more effective, cost you less money, like, boutique firepower with big law background. There's all these sorts of ways that we can give that over. So yes, I do. I mean, specifically and notably for me in family law, I have seen a tremendous shift from pure word of mouth to a lot of online. The firms that I work with that handle divorces, because there's been a lot of big uptick in filings and retention of counsel for divorces as people are stuck together at home. I guess they decide they're not as happy as they might have been when they got out more. They're finding lawyers online, they're vetting lawyers online, they're talking to more than one attorney, and they're doing those consultations virtually, which is really different. And so if you're going to do it virtually, you're not bringing your check into the office. So then you have to also have virtual payment options. So it's not just a shift in marketing and acquisition. It's also a shift in how we run our businesses technologically to enable that digital marketing to be successful.
That's definitely true.
Yeah.
Well, you continue, but I just I sort of noticed that trend as well. And I think the attorneys that are sort of like, I don't advertise, I don't market, they might be surviving off of the word of mouth, but if you don't inject like new techniques in that pipeline, it might dry up at some point. And so,
for sure, and different law firms use their digital assets in different ways. Some use them as a digital brochure. Some use them as a lead generation mechanism. It's not always going to be just generating and spitting out leads, depending upon what your practice area is. And so, different strokes, I suppose. So quickly, domain name registrar, every website has a domain name, which means that someone bought it somewhere. We're hoping that you own and control your own domain name, meaning you have your own account, you didn't buy it through a vendor, and the vendor owns and controls it, because that's a way that they keep you hostage to a contract that may eventually become not as useful for you. And so this is just, some icons of some common domain name registrars. One of the most common is GoDaddy, and other is Network Solutions, which sometimes is a pain in my opinion. Then there's website hosting. I think this is the most misunderstood when I talk to attorneys. Website hosting is critical. You have to do it. Every website has a physical location where all of the components of what makes up your website are stored. And that is where search engines pull from your hosting provider the files that render your site. And that keeps your site connected to the internet. The bottom bullet is the most important one because this is now a Google algorithm ranking factor. Your hosting provider, which most people don't know, has a big impact on how your website performs, most specifically and importantly, how quickly it loads. Page load time and site load time are absolutely, openly said by Google to be ranking factors. If your site speed is slow or your page load time is slow, you're going to have a very high bounce rate and people are going to leave. And then Google will also see that in its analytics and not show your site as often in search results. So just know that if you pick cheap and easy hosting, it can come back to bite you. There's website designers and developers are two different things. Many companies do both. They generally don't do both well. A designer is the one who creates the aesthetic, who worries about the user experience, the colors, the layout, where your social icons go, where your hero image goes at the top of the page, where your attorney photo goes, and just sort of the layout, aesthetic, and representation, visual representation of your brand. A developer is the coder. They're the ones that take, where they're generally PSD files from a designer and create them into a website through code. And they do that by checking all of the technical aspects to make sure that the coding, which is the foundation of the site, renders correctly across a spectrum of devices, usually 4. And they're sort of the more techie folks. They're sometimes the harder to communicate. And some companies have both designers and developers in-house. The larger an agency you get, the more likely they will have all of these people on staff. And some people outsource this functionality to a variety of different vendors. So you can hire separately a designer to do your design and then a developer to develop it, which I think a lot of people don't know. They think they can only hire one. And sometimes designers are terrible developers. And the way your website is developed directly impacts how well it performs in search. So your developer is your best friend, even though they're sometimes difficult communicators because they're behind the screen tech folks. Digital marketing. Yeah, go ahead.
Add one other thing. We made our law firm website ADA compliant a little while back, and the person, my website developer, they didn't know how to do it, so I had to sort of search around and find somebody. But anyway, that's another vendor that you might need to hire at some point too.
Yes. And that is increasingly becoming an issue, much more so for larger firms and firms that work internationally because of the laws like GDPR and all sorts of other laws that you have to comply with. If we're doing just PI in Houston, it's not necessary at this point, but there are free available online guidelines for how to make your website ADA compliant. I don't have the link like memorized in my head because it's kind of long, but I can circulate it to you afterwards so you can include it. But it's great and very thorough and free. So digital marketing really refers to any marketing effort that happens on the internet or involves the internet. And that includes SEO, Google Ads, pay-per-click, social media, content marketing, email marketing, and anything else. I mean, there's a limitless list, but these are kind of the main ones. And each component is really different from the others. Unless you're really talking to a full-scale agency, you will find that most people that you talk to, especially if you're working with like independent vendors on a one-by-one basis, they're going to be very good at some of these things, but not all of these things. And if they're a good business owner, they'll say, I'm amazing at this, hire me for these things. This is who you should use for that. I do it every day. People approach me. I talk to people every day and I say, okay, great. Well, that case management software will work better with this. I'm not as familiar with it. Here's a great contact for you to reach out to, because I think it's more important, and you may find this in your practices as well, to provide value, even if that value isn't for them to hire you, and to be a resource. And also there's enough business out there for all of us. So it's always good to, send people elsewhere if that's where they're going to be the best fit, whether it's personality wise or skill wise. And then campaign and account managers, these are the people that are going to be your main points of contact. They're not necessarily doing the technical work, but they manage client communication. So they manage the campaigns. And in that, they provide the reporting, review the reporting, and take feedback to the team with which to optimize their work. And then once you decide, should you decide to work with an outsourced vendor, whether it's an agency, an independent contractor, a part-time virtual assistant, whatever it may be, they are going to need access to a variety of assets. And this is where, when we start working with a new firm and onboard a new firm, this can set us back if the firm doesn't have access to these items 30 days, 90 days. I mean, because a lot of firms and businesses have worked with a variety of different vendors, and sometimes they just leave the login credentials and assets with those vendors, and then they don't have them when they want to move on to the next vendor. So this is a great list of what a marketing vendor will need to get started. So if you're considering it, and anyway, just so you know what they are, because these should all be things that you own and control and have in a folder, somewhere on your file server, in your case management software, in a CRM, whatever you use, wherever you store your data, the safest place. This is where you want to have these items. The domain name registrar, which we talked about earlier, it's like GoDaddy, the login credentials. You want to have that. Your website login credentials. So you want to have administrator level access to the back end of your website. So if you have a WordPress website, it's usually the name of your site, mine's staceyburke.com/WP-admin/, and then it takes you to a little screen that you put in the username and the password. You want to have administrator level access to your own website. Unless you're working with a vendor that can do that for you, and all you're going to do with your admin level access is mess it up. But in your transition, you want to have this. Logo files. Don't just do a screen capture. It's not a great file format. It will render grainy. So you don't just want a JPEG or a PNG. You want preferably a design file that was created in design software. And those logo file extensions are usually .ai, .eps, or .psd. And then you'll also want to know the colors that are used, Pantone or CMYK, as well as the typography and fonts. Some designers that develop your brand identity will provide that to you in like a little package, and then you can unzip the file and all of that's in there. And someone like me who has design software will be able to open it and use it, some not. But generally, even if you know the vendor that created it and you maintain a good relationship, whatever vendor you work with can usually liaise back with them and get the files that they need, because you want your brand identity to be consistent both in look and feel and quality across print and digital and anywhere else that you share it. It's very important. Your social media channels, you want login credentials or admin level access, because some have login credentials and some you have to just give access to. For all of these channels, you need to know your logins. And if you have a LinkedIn company page, your individual LinkedIn profile needs to be an admin for it, just like your Facebook page. Your individual Facebook profile needs to be an admin for your law firm's page. It should never just be a vendor or an agency. You need to own and control all of these assets so that if you fire someone or if someone goes out of business, which has happened quite a bit, especially during the pandemic, you still have access to it. We have ways that we've developed. I've been doing this now for 8.5 years, that we can regain access to these channels. It is very challenging from a legal standpoint. And we usually have to have the firm file on their letterhead these letters that we've developed, and it can take like weeks or months to regain access. Having access from the outset is very important. Google Suite, which includes Google My Business, Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, Google Search Console, YouTube. There's all sorts of tools. They're all free. They are all extremely important. You need to have your Google Suite be under an email address that you own and control for your business. It should never be under someone else's. And I have another whole slide on this. I feel so strongly about it. And then high resolution photos. Get a headshot, get a professional headshot. Don't take a photo of yourself with your phone. There's a great guy, if you're here in Houston, Chris Gillette. He's an attorney that now shoots photos of attorneys. He's very reasonably priced. His headshots are awesome. He turns them around very quick. And there's, a million and one options. I've worked with a ton of different photographers. He just comes to mind as someone that's quick and easy. And then save the high resolution version, not the low res, not a screen capture, but the high resolution version, because that's what you'll need. I don't know. We have some things in the chat. I don't know if you want me to.
No, It's fine. We're just putting some things in there for discussion. So
Okay, cool.
no need. But I just wanted to say that, like, I have heard stories about some marketing vendors that they'll make your website, but they own your website, and like you warned us about domain and stuff. And so that if you ever don't like them or don't want to pay them, or it's not really working for you, they can take it all away from you. And like, I don't know, your domain, your SEO, I mean, especially if you've had your business for a long time, you can't just rebuild that overnight. So that's just a cautionary tale, like you said, to make sure you have control.
Yes, for sure. And that will come in the form of what they call, we have proprietary software that we build your site on. So that's like, and I don't mind to name names like Scorpion, FindLaw, Foster Web Marketing. There are a variety of companies out there. They do a great job, especially if you're a very big spender. But for small firms, it's not always the right selection, because what they give you, even if you do own your website, is what's called a flat file download. They basically mail you a hard drive and say, here's your website, go ahead and rebuild it somewhere else, because you don't have access to or own the software that they use to build it, because it's proprietary, which is why we build all of ours in open source software, which is WordPress. There's Joomla, Drupal. There's a lot of different, open source languages that you can code in, which means anyone can pick up their website, go to anyone that designs and develops in WordPress, they own and control it, and move on to another vendor. And so just be mindful of working with a company that says, oh, well, we design and develop in proprietary software because it's better. There are advantages, but if you decide that you're unhappy, you have literally nothing. You lose everything. So when you're picking vendors, it is tempting to say, oh, I'll let somebody else in my office meet with them. I'm busy. I have trial. I have depots. I have whatever. Don't delegate these interviews. These are very important for the owner of the business to be involved with, at least at some level, even if there's some initial vetting that's done by someone else. You're going to want to interview any vendor that you work with as if they were as important to your business as your most important and best employee, because they will wind up hopefully making you a lot of money, but either way, costing you money. And so as a member of your team, you need to vet them. And these are not an exhaustive list of questions, but a very good list of questions to start with. Have you worked with a company in my industry before, right? Like, have you worked with someone in the legal industry? There's thousands of marketers just in Houston, right? Have you ever worked with a law firm? If they haven't, they're going to mess up, because they're not going to know how to phrase things. They're not going to be able to write your content. They're not going to understand your practice areas. And while they may be amazing at SEO for plumbers or a pest control company, professional services marketing, which is doctors, accountants, and lawyers, is very different. And they're all governed by very similar advertising guidelines. So if they've worked in some professional services capacity, I'd explore it further. If they've never worked with anyone in professional services, I would walk away before continuing the conversation. Do you have a company like mine I can contact as a reference, right? So you think, oh, references, oh, well, whatever. I have a portfolio on my website, so any of those people, I guess, could be contacted as a reference. But in the proposals that I send out, I include references with phone numbers and email addresses. But if they don't, not everybody is as formal, ask them. I want a firm in the size market that I'm in, or my same market, that's my same size of firm or in my same practice area, that I want to talk to hear what it's like to work with you. And I've been a reference for vendors that I've worked with, as well as sent people to references for this business I have now. Do you offer exclusivity? Do you do non-disclosure agreements? Do you do non-compete agreements? Do you work with my competitors, right? This gets a lot of people crazy, right? I want to be your only person in Raleigh, North Carolina. If that's very important to you, you make sure that that's one of the first questions you ask, because if they don't grant that, it's not worth continuing the conversation. As well as this, I think is very interesting. Who will be my point of contact, right? The person that you speak to in the beginning of a relationship is generally a salesperson, right? And so that salesperson, especially at the bigger companies, completely disappears the second that you sign the contract. You will never hear from them again. They can never help you again. They have no technical background. They don't understand what's going to happen after you get signed. Their whole job is They make commissions off of sales. And that's with most large agencies. I'm not down on sales. Sales is great. It's a big part of my business is business development, but it's important to ask them, am I going to be working with you, who I like and have developed this relationship with and am considering hiring, or who will be managing my account? And if they're not going to be involved, I would want to talk to the person that's actually going to be managing my account before I hire them. Because what if that person sucks? Not fun. And then this is regard to paid spends, right? So if you're running social media advertising or Google ads or YouTube ads or any sort of online advertising where there's charges, some vendors blur those fees together and they say it's $5,000 a month for pay-per-click. Okay, well, great. How much of that are you paying yourself? And how much of my $5,000 are you spending to generate business for me? You have a right to know that. And it's usually a percentage of the spend or it's a flat fee. But sometimes they try to hide that. You have every right to ask and push until you get the information, because if they're taking half of that 5,000 for themselves, like, is that really worth it? What will be the reporting frequency and substance? So am I going to get reporting weekly? Am I going to get reporting monthly? Am I going to get reporting quarterly? And what will it say? Because a conversion to a marketer means someone clicked to call the phone number on your website. Okay, well, that's great. But unless they actually called and completed the call, and the call was, for Ruby's practice, an immigration lead that she's interested in, is not a conversion for her until the lead actually calls and is qualified, right? And it doesn't really, if you really want to walk it all the way through the process, which I do later on, it's really not a conversion unless they sign and prove to be financially valuable to your business. That's something that the marketers don't know. And so later on, we'll talk a little bit about how to tie all of that together, because giving that feedback to the vendors of like, this lead is amazing, I want like only this, or I want 10 more of these, helps them do a better job. So I say monthly reporting is more than frequent enough for the lawyers that I work with. Good Lord. They can barely handle one report a month, but I make them and I do them because it also holds us accountable internally. But reporting frequency and substance, very important. Then there are, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to mention something about security and content backing up and things like that, because we saw with the Facebook going down, what was that, a week ago? Or I don't know, the time is going by fast. Yeah. Like that could be an added question, like where are things saved? What's your security like? What this, especially with a lot of this information they're having access to.
It's a really good point. And then some people, I have had firms ask me to execute contracts that say that like I'll delete and or destroy like any confidential data that I obtained during the course of working with them once it's over, meaning like I won't retain administrative rights to where I can go in and like destroy all their digital assets, which I would never do, because they're a huge firm and it would be problematic. If I'm just going into audit, I sign saying like, once I'm done auditing, I'll delete all your passwords from my system and never use them again. And so you have the right to ask for those things. You are the client in this situation. So tough conversations, and that's a contract term, right? So read contracts before you sign it. You would think, oh my goodness, the majority of us are lawyers. We all took contracts in law school. I actually amateur contracts. It was my only amateur. So woohoo, I don't even think they call it that anymore. But most lawyers don't read them. I ask them, okay, well, what are the services that you're getting from this vendor and how much are you paying? They have no idea. Most people that I talk to, they just know they're getting leads. They like the vendor. They're nice. It's not that expensive. So I always say, send me the contract. Let me review the contract and then I'll figure out what's going on. There is no shame in not understanding, even though you're highly educated and or highly intelligent. So ask questions and know that even if it looks like a boilerplate contract, unless it's fine law or someone like that, the terms are often negotiable. I am generally willing to negotiate. And the more work that someone does with me, the more flexibility I have to negotiate on pricing. So don't be afraid to negotiate on pricing, the duration of the contract, anything like that. This is what we're trained to do. So treat it like any other business interaction and negotiate. You can also obviously have a lawyer who reviews contracts, review it for a reasonable fee. And if it's a substantial duration, a contract that's 24 or 48 months, and it's a lot of money, it might be worth it. Responsibilities and expectations. This can be one of the biggest sticking points in this relationship. because lawyers aren't super thorough with the contracts, and they can sometimes just, hair trigger decide, oh, okay, I'm going to sign up with this random cold caller who called me with something that sounds really great, or my friend said they use this vendor and I like them. Here's $1,000. You need to understand what services you are getting and you're not getting, because that goes a long way towards having appropriate expectations as a consumer, and the vendor being able to manage your expectations. Meaning, if someone only hires me to do social media, I am not working on their SEO. So if they're asking me, why am I not ranking on page 1 for these keyword phrases? I can say, because you're paying me X and the terms of our contract include, ABC, which is not SEO. If you want pricing for SEO, I can price it for you, but that's not what we're doing. And if that's your goal, let's reevaluate our strategy and talk about it. I think that, people get the money and then they start working and then they forget sort of like what they contracted for and what the goals are. And if the leads aren't flowing in, they kind of freak out and want to blame the vendor. But just remember that, there is a scope, a defined scope. And you're in that scope, or you can expand that scope. As I mentioned before, communication and feedback, providing lead feedback is so important. And I would say virtually no firms do it. So this is where you would export maybe monthly, maybe weekly, depending on how organized you are, all of the leads that have come into your system. If you use case management software, it's easy. If you keep an Excel spreadsheet, it should be easy. However you keep track of that, and provide a rating back. And I mean, you could do L+, L-, lead bad, lead good, or 1 to 5, or 1 to 10, or however you want to rank them, as long as you're consistent, and give that back to the vendor so they know what leads are good and what leads aren't good. Because if you don't do that, they're going to continue to spend in the same way or whatever way they view as optimizing your campaign. They see that a certain ad is getting a high number of clicks, so they're going to spend more on that. Well, maybe they're getting clicks and they're all terrible leads. So if you don't tell them that they're all terrible leads, they're going to do what makes sense from a marketing standpoint. So giving them information back, and it doesn't have to be client names, because there are concerns about confidentiality. You could just call them like AB, their initials, or lead number 1, 2, 3. Or if, I'm very familiar with Needle's case management software. It gives them a case number. It assigns a case number when you open it, even as an intake. Give them a number and just say, this lead on this day, this is great. This is a 10 out of 10. I want more of these. The more that you do of that, the better your campaigns will function, the better able your vendor is to optimize the campaigns. And then also, as a consumer, be sure to ask for an oral review of the reporting, especially in the beginning of working with someone, to make sure you understand it. Some lawyers don't want to do this. That's fine. Some understand it. We tried it. We don't just spit it out of software. We rewrite ours so that it's in language more plain speak. But if you don't understand marketing lingo, which most people don't, ask and say, I want to get on a call for 30 minutes and I want you to read this report to me top to bottom and explain what it means. The termination process, like Ruby talked about, this is important. It's sort of like a prenup, right? You don't want to think about getting divorced when you're getting married, but it happens. So you need to think about what the termination of this, vendor relationship process is going to look like when you start. Who owns the assets? Ensure you can easily change your passwords and revoke access if you need to terminate a vendor. I mean, I've gone into clients' Facebook pages once I get, business manager access through my agency business manager, and they've got 25 people with admin rights to their page from like 5 vendors ago, because they just leave everybody on. I try to go in and remove myself when I'm no longer working with a firm, because I don't want a mistake to be made or any expectations that I'm going to continue to do work. But most people don't do that. And so one of the first things that we do is go in and clean house. If you are an admin on your channels, you can do that and check them regularly. For like LinkedIn and Facebook, you log in as an admin and see who else are admins. Oh, that person doesn't work for me anymore. I don't want them having admin access to my social media channels. Let's get rid of them. So it's not just for vendors, for employees too. And then reiterating the Google assets, you really can only hold an agency responsible if you have the same level of access to the data that they do. So you can set up your own Google Analytics account. They'll say, oh, we need to set it up under ours. We have this master account and we put everyone under the master. It's not true. That's a way that they keep you trapped. You set up your own Google Analytics account that you own and control in your Google suite that's on your Gmail address, and then you grant them access to it. That's the best way to handle it. With Google, this is the most important. Google My Business is more important now than it's ever been. And remember, you are the boss. Once you outsource any function of your business, you automatically become a client or a consumer yourself and take on the role of vendor management. And managing vendors has its own set of skills, which we've kind of talked about throughout this presentation. It enables you to, vet and hire a lot of talent without having to employ them full-time and absorb the overhead. And it also, when done properly, enables you to hold your vendors accountable and ensure that they're delivering what they're supposed to under your contract. Results.
I have a quick question. One of my assistant who's watching, and she's the one who helps out with a lot of this, was asking me, she's like, how do most people keep track of the company logins safely and manage the granting of access? Like we have a doc that we only share with certain people, but it's sort of like the keys to the kingdom for everything, and sort of keeping track of those things, because after a while, I sort of sympathize for the people that have like 25 people. I mean, I'm not like that, but because you have somebody and then you forget to go into the admin place and take them off and this and that, and so and there's so many accounts. Oh my gosh, there's like Avo, LinkedIn, Google My Business, website, like ugh. So do you have any advice on where to manage, or do most people put things?
Sure. So if you have case management software or a CRM, whatever you use to run your business, that's the best place to put them. And you can, we built out custom fields in our CRM for both the law firm entities logins, as well as the individual attorneys that are associated with the law firm entities logins, which would be more of those directory listings on the individual attorneys. And then the firm level, they'll have the social media channels, Better Business Bureau, all of those sorts of things. So I like to keep them in software instead of in a document, because document can get corrupted and then you lose everything. And so that's how we generally do it. Not all law firms do it that way. A lot of them keep it in a document, a spreadsheet. It scares me because they're corruptible, or someone could go in and accidentally delete them all. And unless it's in Dropbox and it has the capability for immediate restoration, that can be problematic. There's also software as a service out there that are like, password websites, right? Where you store all your passwords in a password website. There's millions of them. One of those could be good too. But if you already have a place where you keep your client data, it should be very secure. And so that's usually where, even if you just make like a client that's like administrative login credentials and you put them all under that, I like it to be inside of software personally. That's my thought.
Yep. That sounds good.
So results, the tail end, but the most important.
I know that's what it's all about, right?
All about, right.
Hanging on that.
You can hire the right people, you can supervise them amazingly, build great relationships, sign awesome contracts, but if they don't do a good job, what's the point? So the proof is in the pudding. Like I keep reiterating, don't accept reporting that you don't understand or that you feel is inadequate. I work with firms right now that pay thousands of dollars to vendors and get no reporting at all. It is common. A vendor should be able to answer all of your questions and provide you with reporting, even if it's not like a fancy PDF that's 6 to 10 pages like what we send every month. Just put some metrics in the body of an email and send it to you, right? If it's a video vendor, they should be able to show you like how many views, how many impressions, how many new subscribers to my channel, like, what have all of the metrics that you would need to know to determine if their work is valuable. Yes, you can go in and export them yourself, but you're paying them to prove their worth. And so meaningful reporting, important again, but don't just track, analyze. So setting these regular calls and meetings with your vendors are great, but you need to come prepared with your own questions. Don't just let the vendor read the report and kind of explain it to you. If you have questions, have your list ready, save them up. Don't just send them like emails all day, every day. It's sometimes better to save them up and have one constructive, cohesive conversation where they can answer all of your questions unless they're really urgent. But an important point that we haven't touched on yet is what benchmark data is, right? So say I onboard a new client for content and social media marketing, which is a common service that I provide as a bundle. What's their benchmark data right now? So go into their Google Analytics if they have it. If not, they have no benchmark data. But the social platforms have self-contained key performance indicators in the insights, and that's all free. So go into their social channels, find out like what their following has been trending like, what their numbers are, how many clicks their links are getting, how many likes or favorites or reactions or engagements or shares, all of those sort of metrics. Start with some benchmarks and then see, is my work that I'm doing increasing those benchmarks, right? Is your rate of new like Facebook fan acquisition better with my work than it was just organically or, doing nothing? The content marketing, if they have Google Analytics and you can look at sort of what their bounce rate was and how, their existing content was performing and you're adding content, you can see how your blog posts are performing. Are they one of the top 10 performing pages on the site each month? How are the lawyer bios performing? Where are people bouncing off the site? So having some of that initial benchmark data that you start with can be helpful so that you can both, have your own goals in mind, and it helps you more hold the vendor accountable because you know where you started, right? It's easy for them to say, oh, you have 100,000 impressions. Well, great. I don't know, how many did I have last month when I wasn't paying you any money? I want to know percentage increase, decrease, those sorts of things.
And people might not have their Google Analytics code on the right website, the right pages of the website, and they might not have been collecting this whole time.
Yes. And so that's an important point. And so you can right click on a website and it will show up an option to view page source. And then you can search for the letters UA or search for Google in the page source code. And it should take you and show you what Google Analytics code is on your website. It sometimes can be complicated to find, but that's how we find out if someone has Google Analytics, and then we know their account number. And then with that account number, you can kind of backhack it from there. But you really should only have to input the code once if your developer inputs it correctly. It should only need to be input one time. Make sure you're getting the data you want. I'm having a little bit of a broken record, but part of good reporting is providing data that matters to you. Right? So metrics to marketers are like impressions and shares and great and whatever. Like an insurance defense firm that I work with right now, they want to gain more followers in the insurance industry from specific carriers that they want to do more business with in the state that they're in. So that's one of the things they want us to report on. Not everybody cares who their new followers are on social media. They want us to screen capture and tell them detail about each new follower that they gain on LinkedIn as their big channel. Makes sense for their industry every month. And so that's a metric that's important to them. So we added that into their reporting, and they're gaining 20 to 40 page followers a month from the insurance industry. They're thrilled, right? They don't really necessarily care about like how much interaction their tweets are getting, even though we're working our butts on that too. That they want to know about that. And so if there is something that's important to you that's not included in the report, ask. And then include, they should be regular and use the same metrics so that you can do what I'm talking about, the comparison, right? If you're talking about the number of followers one month, you should talk about the number of followers the next month. So you can kind of track month to month and compare to that baseline. So even when you're working with a vendor, it's still a good idea to keep track of your own metrics, which is why I want you to have access to your own analytics. And this is my last slide, but internal metrics are different than the metrics that marketers use. And this is where working with someone who has worked in the legal industry and or run their own business can be beneficial. So lead tracking, where are you tracking your leads? Are you entering the data uniformly and accurately in your software in a way that can be exported and shared with your vendor? Conversion rate, marketing vendors, conversion definition is different. Those are leads. So it's up to you to track how many of the leads convert into paying customers. Based on how much you're paying your vendor, how much does each lead that you sign up cost to acquire, your acquisition cost per lead, and then acquisition cost per signed case. Those are both very important internal financial metrics to track when you are working with vendors and spending money to make sure that your return on investment is worth it. And then projected value. This is sort of like the next thing. I mean, a lot of firms have to do this if they have a line of credit with the bank. They've got to know what the value of their docket is to maintain their line of credit. And that may just be a PI thing, which is my background is personal injury litigation. But I don't know. How much is each new customer worth to your business? Even if you've got to do a little digging around, you're generally going to know, okay, this is, this kind of case. It'll probably net me X, right? And so knowing that projected value to your firm informs, if the value is less than what you're spending to acquire the lead, not worth it. So these metrics are internally what's very important for you to know, and you cannot expect your vendor to know this. They don't know how many leads you're signing. They don't know what leads you're signing. They don't know the value you're assigning to your leads. And so keeping track of this internally allows you to have those more sort of in-depth and valuable and detailed conversations with the vendor so that you can sort of be like, hey, are you worth the money I'm spending or not? And if not, how can we fix it? And then that's me. So I can stop sharing now if you want, and we can do questions or whatever you would like me to do, Ruby. Oh, I think you're muted.
Thank you so much, Stacey. I really appreciate that. And we'll send a closing email to those who registered with your slides and our slides and ways to stay in touch with you and as much as what you're seeing here on this slide. If anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or put your video on, whatever you'd like. We've got some closing slides at the end. I have a question. I mean, feel free if anybody has a question. One of my questions is like, how long do you think? A lot of marketing vendors say it takes this many months until you start seeing results. Like, when do you believe them and when do you not? Like, because sometimes, like, because maybe it's like it's struggling and you're like, oh, maybe I should cut, and jump ship or whatever that expression is, and try to find somebody else. Like, do you have any like rule of thumb or how to gauge that?
Sure. I mean, certain things like Google AdWords, I tell people it's now Google Ads. They shorten the name, pay-per-click, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. I say give a campaign 3 months. Okay. You should get leads within the first month, but it takes a little while. Like for certain things like that, I'll start off the spend low and diversified and then optimize over time. So I would say for AdWords, I'd give it 3 months. SEO, that depends on what market you're in, how competitive your geographical location is, how competitive your practice area is, and what keyword phrases you want to optimize for. I mean, SEO is a really long-term play. You cannot say that you're going to give SEO a 3-month shot, for example. It's not long enough. I would say 6 to 12 months. And that's a huge investment, but if they're doing it right, they're building digital value that will last and stay with you over time forever. And that value only continues to pay dividends because those leads are, they call them free leads, but if you're doing SEO, are they really free? I don't know. But social media marketing, content marketing, you should be able to see results right away in the metrics. It depends on what results it is that you're looking for. If you're looking for positive trends or if you're looking for actual lead volume, right? Brand awareness versus uptick in new cases, that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, most things do take at least a few months to be successful.
That's a really good point. So it sort of depends on which of the areas, which vendor, it might have a different lead time. And I think that's really spot on. That's what I've seen as well and heard from some of my vendors as well. Another thing that I heard that I think really struck with me, one of my vendors I've used for a really long time, he said, like, I can get your phone to ring, Ruby, but what you do after that, that's on you. And I was thinking, that's really true. And that goes into how this isn't marketing and business development is not in a vacuum. You need to have their operations in place so that like when that call comes in, that you have a great script, you have a great person answering the phone, you have the great procedures, so because it's like the leaky bucket, you can be putting all of this in marketing, but if there's a lot of holes and you're losing them because you don't have a great person answering the phone, you have some bad procedures that take a little bit too long to get to the end result, or it's difficult to schedule a call, you could lose them. And so I think that's just another reminder that this is a part of the whole ecosystem of running a business, and operations customer service are so critical to the big picture as well.
Yes, intake is very important. And it was one of my jobs at both of the firms that I worked at. The last firm where I was a partner, we had over 200,000 cases in our class action and mass tort department. And so I ran intake for that because I did all the marketing. And you're right. If you don't have the systems set in place to be able to capitalize on the expenditures that you're going to make, you are flushing money down the toilet. And so, we are working with a firm right now on several large national class actions that they're marketing to acquire increased volume of clients for. But before we launched the campaign, we made sure that we had the right distribution lists set up internally, that they had the right dedicated hunt group phone numbers, that they had their intake script set up, that it matched, what we were asking and said on the landing pages and the ad copy and all of that. And so, if you work with a vendor who understands the full process, they're also going to make recommendations. I have a firm right now that I'm making them change their entire phone system because it's messing up their intake. But if your vendor isn't listening to the calls to know that that's an issue, it's problematic.
No, definitely. We have a question from Nilima. So most small, mid-sized immigration or other law firms generally cater to their local community. Most clients are from their own community. I think it depends on your business, but how does your marketing team help in such cases? So, and if Nilima, you want to unmute yourself if you wanted to clarify anything, feel free. But go ahead, Stacey.
Yeah. So local is where it's at. Local is what Google wants to serve up. It wants to serve up local results. One of the top search phrases in every area is like, this type of attorney near me, or this type of attorney, this zip code. And so local searches are extremely important. And so localizing the content on your website, if you are only serving a very specific geographic area or even a specific subset of a geographic area, making sure that you include that on every page of your content and the metadata for your content on your social channels and the designs, as well as making sure that your Google My Business listing and Bing Places listing are fully built out and optimized and have what's called the NAP, name, address, phone number, an exact match in every location online. That's the first step for local search. But please ask away. I noticed that you unmuted. So if I didn't nail it, ask me more.
No, thank you so much, Stacey and Ruby. Yeah, my question basically was, you kind of answered it. So, I'm just thinking of starting a small firm. So, I belong to Indian community. So, I kind of look at that group, and I've seen, like, even with a lot of other, small firms, they kind of, to start off at least, they kind of cater to their own community because, I guess it's more of a trust thing with the clients. So, how do you expand from there as a question? Is it, I know most of it, as Ruby started it, it's word of mouth, that's always been there, even though we do this, the other marketing. But I was just trying to understand, how do you grow, how do you expand it to others, within, beyond this beyond your community? How does your firm help in expanding this? Of course, internet is for everyone. It doesn't, cater to one community.
Right.
But what is it that I don't know? Like I still think most of the marketing thing is through your own communication. Personally interacting, or through, of course, after COVID, it's through Zoom and other meetings. But how is it that how are we going to expand it, as what I'm not trying to understand?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very valid question. Sure, right? It's the easiest to get business from people that know and trust us. My first client, when I left my firm, my first and best client was my boss that I quit my job to go become a consultant. He said, I'll be your first and best client. And so it's the easiest to get business from people who know and trust us, but how to expand from there. So showing case studies is a really good way, if your practice lends itself to that, showing case studies of where, and you can anonymize them, right? This person came to me with this issue. This is how long it took for us and the steps that we took to address this issue. And this is where this person is today. Also testimonials. We do a lot of, hashtag testimonial Tuesday, right? You get reviews online. That's how you build up your social proof and your digital credibility and increases you showing up in search results. So if you get a good review on Google, a good review on Facebook or Avo or any of the directories, you can repurpose it by creating a social graphic, by incorporating it into your website. And the more sort of storytelling that you're able to do from another person's perspective, from the potential client's perspective, I think the more relatable and sellable you become to people who may not know you yet.
Yeah, no, that's truly valuable information. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I never thought about it from that perspective, but what you said is true. It's as long as you're doing a good job, it shouldn't mind. But as you said, it's the product or it's a service that you're selling to everyone. Yeah, no, thank you so much. It's been a great session. Thank you, Ruby and Stacey. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're closing up. We're at the top of the hour. I can't thank you enough, Stacey, for your valuable experience and advice and in helping answer questions as well. And I know that it was a deep dive, and you have a wealth of information on this topic. And so we'll definitely send your information out to those who registered. Just in closing, we do have a webinar every month, and the next one will be November 3rd with Nadine Heights, who's going to be talking about a top 10 tech tips you should have with your law firm. She's a great resource, and so we're excited to have her as well. December 8th, we're going to be talking with Ruth McChesney about show me the money, not your money, show me the money. It's going to be a financial theme about law firm finances, and as we're closing up the year in the books. And so we also, lots of different ways to reach out to us. We have the Facebook group, Power Up Your Practice. Feel free to keep the conversation from month to month going there. Post questions, feel free to join. We also are posting these roundtable discussions on YouTube. If you have any suggestions on other topics, love to have those suggestions. If you'd like to be a co-panelist, feel free to email me as well. My email is here, ruby@powerstrategygroup.com. We have everything up until January booked. We're having Chuck Cook on in January. We're going to be talking about working with the media, and it's sort of like extension on business development, but also as an expertise in your field. And so if you want to join the Facebook group, it's called Power Up Your Practice. And I'm going to be speaking to the AILA University Roundtable on a guide to prepare your law firm for the new year on just next Wednesday, actually. And closing up, we have a law firm retreat, small group, about 5 to 6 registrants from November all day Friday from about 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Central on Friday the 5th of November and 6th of September. Saturday, Friday, November 5th. And Saturday, November 6th. So it's 10 hours plus of instruction. You get a check-in before, and then the first 2 people to register get a copy of my book. And we'll be covering all the key points from the book of running a firm. Whether you just started a firm, you're about to, or you've had your firm for 30 years, you can find value in this survey course and this small group discussion. And you can see some of the topics here that we'll be covering. Mostly every module is a chapter of the book. And we put a link in the chat for if you'd like a link to buy the book and with a discount. So that was really fast, a little closing, but we put these together to have value, to have discussion, for people to be able to learn from each other, from other experts in the field. And I'm just really glad that we can have this conversation. I just wanted to mention one thing in terms of law practice management. Definitely, if you've had some tough a couple of years with your finances, with the business, look into the employee retention tax credit. That is something I'll be posting on some of the Facebook group and stuff, but is something that's due by the end of the year if you might be eligible for potentially thousands of dollars. So it's something to consider to see if you're eligible for it. But anyway, thank you again, Stacey. Really appreciate it. I owe you coffee, lunch sometime. So, so thanks everyone. Have a great day and have a great week. We'll see you next month.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.